If you live in the Sierra Nevada, this is a familiar sight. It is a scene that is repeated up and down the Central Sierra each summer. Finding ways to improve the protection of homes and reduce the risk of fire in rural communities means learning from experience. Fire kills trees. At the same time, fire helps to preserve forest ecosystems. Fire has played a key role in our forests for thousands of years, and no place has it played a bigger role than in California.
California is the classic fire environment. What's different now is that we have injected society and people into that fire environment, and they want to live in it. And many times they try to live in it pretending that it is not a fire environment.
The fire that burned through Sunrise Basin on the eastern side of the Sierra provides dramatic evidence of what may be in store for the larger area. The low-intensity natural fires that historically burned through these forests removed small trees and brush. If allowed to accumulate, these materials become the fuel for larger fires. Large, catastrophic fires devastate forests. They destroy wildlife habitat and create erosion and other watershed problems. Ironically, the current fire hazard in our forests is the result of years of excellent fire protection and suppression. To maintain a healthy forest, the fuel vegetation must be reduced, either by controlled fires or by timber thinning.
When we talk about thinning in an area like this, we're talking about removing some of the trees. Not all of the trees, but some of the trees. The primary reason is to make some openings in the canopy so that the fire will not carry all the way through in the crowns of the trees.
The sum of it all is that by thinning the forest out and removing the dead trees, we make the forest much more resilient, much more capable of withstanding an intense or any wildfire, because the wildfire is likely to be intense.
Even though thinning and fire management are practical solutions to the threat of large-scale fires, these practices are controversial.
I prefer a forest that doesn't have stumps in it. On the other hand, I recognize that the best way to maintain the forest that I enjoy so much and appreciate as an ecologist for all of its ecosystem benefits is to do something so that it's resilient to fire. That's an ecosystem function, being resilient to fire, and we've lost that function. And people need to understand that that's the most critical part of the ecosystem we need to restore right now, or else they won't have the same type of forest to look at.
Objections to logging are understandable. The resulting forest is not the thick, dense stands of trees that many people prefer.
We buy a whole series of problems, most of them associated with fire, right along with that dense forest. And so the forest that we're in right now is a classic example of a forest that most people would view as being very pretty, but is a forest that, as we have seen, is a very dangerous forest from the standpoint of fire, and one that's not likely to last very long. I live up at Lake Tahoe, and the society that lives there has felt in the past that the cutting of any tree was the wrong thing to do. And what that has led us to then is an extremely overly dense stand of trees surrounding the lake that now are suffering the consequences of that overstocking and the long drought that we've been experiencing. And the result then is a forest that is dying more rapidly than it's growing. Easily 1 out of every 4 trees is dead. And in many places, 80% of the trees are dead for tens of acres. In many cases, 100 acres or more. Patches of dead trees exist around the Lake Tahoe Basin. And this is ugly, and it's very flammable. And we will see the results of it in the not too distant future.
Most of the people that I talk to, and I've been in several areas where fires have burned through homes, have a little different perspective on things once they've seen what can happen under different conditions with a fire. So it's sometimes hard to talk to people in advance of a fire and say that what we're doing here is going to help us in the event that we get a fire.
After the fire in Sunrise Basin, investigators studied the burn pattern to learn how previous forest management affected the fire's behavior.
With respect to the fire that burned through Sunrise Basin, one thing that I could say for sure is that if some of the fuel had been removed on that upper end, the fire would have been less intense. There's a strip there between the area that we treated in the subdivision that had no trees removed, and that was fairly dense, and the fire did burn hot in that area, and that's in the vicinity where the 2 homes were lost.
The Forest Service must consider the costs involved with thinning or control burn measures and contrast them with those of fighting large fires. It costs much less to prevent fires than to fight them. Managing the national forests is difficult. It is an ever-changing process of learning and improving upon the management practices of the past.
We have to admit that no matter how much scientific research we do, the natural world is so complex we may not ever understand all of the different intricacies and parts and how they fit together. So if we want to have healthy ecosystems and manage for them, the best thing we can do is to say, well, before we were here, they must have been healthy. So if we can figure out what those conditions were then and try and at least mimic some of that, we can at least feel more comfortable that we're maintaining ecosystem health and resiliency.
Everyone's goal is healthy, safe, and beautiful forests. You can help the Forest Service by maintaining a defensible space around your home, by supporting our activities to reduce the fuels in fire-prone areas, and by informing others. It is a complex issue, but one that must be addressed in the near future.